Hello, college sports fans. I'm trying something that's a little bit different this week here. I typically in the past have done a fan game of the week, and I've really enjoyed doing those. However, there was just so many great games that are under the radar that I could have picked in a poll, just way too many to narrow it down to about 5 choices. So instead, I've decided to make a video called Week 9 Under the Radar Games You Must Watch. These are 8 games that are flying a little bit under the radar, and I think they are very interesting towards the conference races. And even though they're not, big ranked matchups, many of them, these are still very important games towards the college football season. So let's just jump right into it. This first one is between number 3 Penn State at Wisconsin. The Nittany Lions had a bye coming into this game. They're undefeated. They're looking really, really, really good with a strong chance to win the national championship this year. However, quietly, Wisconsin has gotten a lot better throughout the season. So the Penn State Nittany Lions, they lead the all-time series just 11-9. So this is one of the more even Big Ten matchups in the conference, and they first played back in 1953. However, Penn State is currently on a 5-game winning streak over Wisconsin, including an epic Big Ten championship back in 2016 where Penn State won 38-31. Of course, they then went on to go to the Rose Bowl and played USC and lost in one of the most thrilling Rose Bowl games of all time, which I talked about in my previous USC and Penn State video when they played a couple weekends ago. This is a major trap game for Penn State, as quietly Wisconsin started off a little rough, but they've gotten much better as the season has gone on. They are now 5-2, and listen to how they've done their last 3 games. They beat Purdue at home 52-6. They beat Rutgers on the road 42-7. That was a stunner. I think a lot of people thought that was going to be a much closer game. And then they went on the road against Northwestern and beat them 23-3. So they've dominated their last 3 opponents. Now, granted, they aren't the greatest of Big Ten teams, but this is still increasing the confidence, especially among this Wisconsin offense, which really struggled at the beginning. And now it seems like they've found their superstar running back for this season in Tawee Walker, who transferred in from Oklahoma. He's been playing really, really, really well, and Braden Locke has really emerged as a good quarterback for Wisconsin this season. Now, Penn State, of course, as I've already said, they're coming off a bye, and this is the perfect trap game, though, still, even coming off a bye, because their next game after they play Wisconsin is a home game against Ohio State, one of their most hated rivals, and the last really huge game of Penn State's regular season for their chance to get to the Big Ten championship. So there's the possibility they could overlook Wisconsin looking ahead to Ohio State and end up losing this one. And as of right now, a nighttime game in Camp Randall, Penn State is only favored by 6.5. All right. The next game is number 11 BYU at UCF. Why is this an interesting game? Well, BYU has really had some close games recently, and they avoided a serious scare at home on Friday night against a struggling Oklahoma State team, an Oklahoma State team that was 3-0 to start the year, then had lost 3 straight and completely taken themselves out of the conference title picture. The Cowboys basically had nothing left to play for, and yet that still was a super close game that BYU had to have a great comeback, great final drive at the end to win the game. So they're undefeated, but now they have to make a long road trip to Orlando. Very long road trip for BYU. And the UCF Knights almost upset the other top team in the Big 12 against Iowa State. The Knights and the Cyclones had a really, really close matchup. And UCF, they've kind of figured out more of a dangerous offense. They had some struggles, but they've got a great coach in Gus Malzahn. And UCF is actually averaging more yards than BYU, 465 yards to 400, and they're averaging 280 yards on the ground, which is mostly thanks to their superstar running back, R.J. Harvey. It does need to be said, though, that UCF's passing defense has not been very good. They've been giving up around 250 passing yards per game. So Jake Retzlaff could have a fantastic showing. And BYU only leads the all-time series 2-1 after winning the 2020 Boca Raton Bowl 49-23. Interesting point, BYU is only favored by 1 point going on the road to Orlando. So it seems like the bettors agree with me that after the way the Knights played against Iowa State and after the way BYU played against Oklahoma State, this one should be very, very, very close. All right, let's move on to the top player in the country playing for the Boise State Broncos, who are number 17 in the country, going on the road against UNLV. So Boise has 2 difficult road games this season, and you could argue that they need to win both of them. However, you could also argue that they could split both of them and still make it to the college football playoff by dominating the rest of the teams and, winning the Mountain West Conference. This is the first of those 2 games. The other one is a road game against San Jose State, who is currently 5-1, just like UNLV is. But UNLV probably a little bit more difficult. So you could argue this is Boise State's last most difficult game of the season. UNLV has a red-hot offense, which is great to see for the Rebels because they lost their quarterback early in the season due to NIL disputes, which is pretty interesting. Ricky White has been one of the best wide receivers in the country. He's got 614 yards and 9 touchdowns. And quarterback Haj Malik Williams has a 70% completion percentage with 838 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Not bad for a backup quarterback there. He came in and he's really helped save UNLV's season. However, Boise State has the best player in all of college football right now in Ashton Jeanty, who's first place in the Heisman race right now with 1,248 yards, just shy of 10 yards per carry, and 17 touchdowns. And he's only done that in half of the season. We still have another half of the season left to go. Boise overall has dominated UNLV and has not lost to the Rebels since they've both been in the Mountain West Conference. The Broncos lead the all-time series 9-3, including winning the Mountain West Championship against UNLV on the road in Las Vegas last year, 44-20, which made it 7 in a row for the Broncos in this series. This, once again, is on the road in Las Vegas, just like their last matchup. UNLV badly wants to beat Boise State, as they've really struggled to, as I've just said. And Boise is only favored by 2.5 points. So for all the other big-time Group of 5 teams, if you're a fan of Memphis, if you're a fan of Navy, Army, this is a game that you want to pay attention to for sure. All right, now let's talk about a really good ACC battle and a great rivalry. Syracuse on the road against Pittsburgh, who's number 19 in the country. This is Kyle McCord versus Eli Holstein. Both of them have been elite transfer portal quarterbacks. McCord coming in from Ohio State, as most people know, and Holstein coming in from Alabama, where he was a backup with Crimson Tide. Now he's turned into a superstar quarterback for Pitt, showing how great a transfer portal can be. Even though Pitt fans didn't work out for them when Jordan Addison left and went to USC, hey, here's a scenario where it works out for you. You get a great player in Holstein, and now you're having an amazing season. The Orange, though, have already lost a stunner at home earlier this season to Stanford, who is an ACC opponent now. So they have a conference loss, so they cannot have another conference loss this season. And Pitt right now is only favored by 4 points, as each of them have had their fair share of close games lately. The Pittsburgh Panthers lead the all-time rivalry series 43-32 with 3 ties, and each team at one point in this series actually had an 11-game winning streak against each other. Syracuse won last year in the Bronx, 28-13, and then, crazy enough, Pittsburgh won a game in 2016, 76-61. No, that is not a basketball score. That really was the football score. Pitt won 76-61 in 2016. and Pittsburgh is the most played opponent for the Syracuse Orange. So this truly is an amazing rivalry in the ACC conference. This will be a really fun game, and this will be a conference title eliminator and a playoff eliminator for Syracuse if they lose this game. All right, let's move on to another intriguing ACC game. Number 22, SMU at Duke. The Mustangs are currently 3-0 in ACC play, and based on the schedule, they will likely go out and go to the ACC championship for a spot in the CFB as long as they don't trip up against some of these other teams. But Duke, on the other hand, is off to a great start in the Manny Diaz era. They've lost to Georgia Tech, though, already. That's their one loss, so they have a conference loss. Just like Syracuse, they can't lose another conference game. Otherwise, their title hopes are over. However, they just beat Florida State for the first time ever. Duke forced 4 turnovers to beat Florida State, as they were previously 0-20 against the Seminoles. And the highest amount of points they have given up all season is just 24 in their loss to Georgia Tech. So this Duke defense is elite. The offense, on the other hand, has been a struggle, and they've been in a lot of very tight, low-scoring games. Southern Methodist, on the other hand, has a great offense, averaging 40.7 points per game and 440 yards per game. Definitely the best offense that Duke has played all season long. And as a result, SMU is favored by 11.5 points. And they've only played each other twice in the 1950s, and Duke won both times. All right, I just have 3 more games left to go, but real quick, if you like this content, please like and subscribe and share with someone else who you think may also like this content. Now let's move on to Texas Tech at TCU. Really great rivalry series. Texas Tech leads the all-time series 33-30 with just 3 ties, and they've been playing each other since 1926. So I'm surprised this matchup is not a more talked about rivalry. Tech won last year at home 35-28, so there's a close one last year. Texas Tech has won 3 close games this year. First over Arizona State, 30-22, then Cincinnati, 44-41, and then at Arizona, 28-22, before getting absolutely whooped at home by Baylor, 59-35, a struggling Baylor Bears team. So even though Texas Tech is 5-2 and TCU is 4-3, TCU is actually favored by about 6 to 6.5 points at home. As the Horned Frogs not started out very well this year, they already have 2 conference losses, so the season is practically over for TCU. Once again, all they can do is pretty much create chaos and try to get to a bowl game, maybe even a decent bowl game. And they're coming off a really big win as they beat Utah 13-7. And that was on the road against Utah, 13-7. Now they're coming back home. They've got Texas Tech coming in, and the Frogs also have a very easy schedule the rest of the way, because after they play Texas Tech, they're going to play arch rival Baylor, who just talked about dominated Texas Tech. Then they're going to play at home against Oklahoma State, and then at home against Arizona, and then they're going to go on the road against Cincinnati, which, besides their rivalry with Baylor, which is on the road, really their toughest game remaining after this is the Cincinnati Bearcats in the season finale. So TCU really doesn't have the hardest path the rest of the way, and they're fighting to have a winning season. They beat the Red Raiders at home. There's a good chance that they could do that, and as a result, that would knock Texas Tech out of the Big 12 conference title race and make things more clear in that conference. All right, next matchup. This one, I will admit, isn't as under the radar anymore following what's happened at the end of last week. I already had this one written down, so I decided to talk about it anyways. But number 5, Texas at number 25, Vanderbilt. Here's what I think is absolutely ridiculous, though, is that Texas is favored by 18.5 points. Did they forget what Vanderbilt did to Alabama? The reason why I think this is the spread is because Vanderbilt did not play well against Ball State. Point in that regard, I agree with the spread. However, I think Diego Pavia is one of those guys that's going to get fired up for a big game, just like he did against Alabama, just like he did against Kentucky when it's a conference opponent. They have Texas coming in, another opportunity for the Commodores to knock off a top 5 team this season. Everyone figures that Texas will bounce back, and I got to be honest, I also believe that Quinn Ewers and this Texas offense is going to bounce back from what happened last week. Vanderbilt's got a great defense, but their defense still is not the same as Georgia's defense. However, I don't think it's an 18.5 point spread. I really think it could be within 10 points. Definitely is still worth a watch. And then Cincinnati at Colorado. This is the last one here. It's the battle of the CUs, Cincinnati University and Colorado University. Cincinnati quietly has been one of the best offenses in the Big 12, averaging 450 yards per game and 30 points per game. That being said, they've only scored 19 at UCF, 24 versus Arizona State, but they still won both of those games, showing that they could even win games when their offense happens to be struggling, which again, those are the only 2 instances of that occurring. Brendan Sorsby, former Indiana Hoosier quarterback, has been elite this season with 1,928 yards, 67% completion, 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and 6 rushing touchdowns. And they have a great running back duo of Evan Pryor and Corey Kiner, and they've kept things really well balanced on the ground. And then Xavier Henderson has been an elite receiver with 538 yards and 4 touchdowns. So if Travis Hunter is not 100%, then Xavier Henderson is somebody who could really go off and dominate this game. However, it is on the road. Colorado is the favorite. And what's crazy is Colorado is a team that I thought for sure, I think almost everybody thought for sure, would go 4-8 again, maybe 5-7. They win this game and they're 6-2, and they're going bowling in just year 2 of Deion Sanders. And gotta be honest, that's pretty impressive for Coach Sanders. He may very well be the real deal if that's the case. Anyways, thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video, once again, please like and subscribe. Share with somebody else who you think might like this video. And I've got more content coming out this week with some more in-depth previews of games such as Notre Dame versus Navy, Alabama taking on Missouri, and then the big game between LSU and Texas A&M. So stay tuned for those videos. Thank you so much for listening to the College Sports Superfan.